Hi, I'm dialect coach Mark Dallas of TalkLikeThat.com, and I was interviewed by KeithAndrewNetWork.
For people who want to know what is the Keith Andrew Network, the whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. So prove them you can still amount to something. That being said, this is episode 897. That's right, we're close to the goal of 900. This is 897. So let's take a little trip back in time to 1997. What were you doing back then?
What was I doing in 97? What I want to say is, I was just a baby then, but I can't. I've got too many gray hairs to be able to get away with that. So 1997, I know what I was doing. That was the year I met my wife. So I was in London. I was living in London, England, not London, Ontario. And I was basically I was living in West London. I remember I went out to a bar with my brother and his friends, and I didn't want to go, but she was in that bar too, and met her, and the rest is history. So that's what I was doing in 97.
No, absolutely. And it's funny we should talk about, you actually, it's funny you should mention you're from Canada. My next season will take place this January and 22. But in the meantime, I'm going to test the waters and do a brand new show called Keith Andrew Network International. And for that, for season 1 will be all of Canada. Season 2 will be all of England. Season 3, Australia. And I would love to have you a part of episode 1 of All About Canada when we do the show.
Awesome. All right. But you said 22. So that's like 200 years away. I don't think I'll be around then. You might be immortal, but I don't think I am.
Well, I meant to say 2022.
I know what you mean. I didn't want to interrupt your flow. So, and when you say I'm from Canada, I'm coming to you from Canada. I've lived in Canada since 2002. My wife and I, and actually we had one kid then. Now we got 3. We moved out here and from England. So I'm originally from England, but now I'm in Toronto.
Hey, it's up to you. You can be added to the list of Canada, or you can be added to the list
you
of
can
England.
Put me in. Yeah, put me in both.
No, absolutely. So the first question I want to ask you is, you are a professional teacher and a professional coach. So right. What is the correct term? I know you're a coach. So are you more like a teacher, or are you more like a coach?
Well, I'm at the moment, I'm more of a coach. I'm actually a dialect coach. So, actually, I wear many hats because I was a teacher of English for many years. I taught English as a second language for about 15 years. So I did that. And then I went into management in the same language school, and still helping students and teachers teaching the English as well. And it's more recently that I went full time into becoming a dialect coach. So now I work, I still work with professionals from other countries, but a lot of my clients now are actually actors. So I'm helping them not kind of improving their accent in English, but gaining a new accent in English.
No, I agree with you. And the one thing I read that you help people control their accents. I think an accent helps you get a part, number one. And there's the people who I interviewed who have a strong accent, but they always say, I never got this part because I sound too British or I sound too Australian. I mean, look, you have Hugh Jackman, Hugh Laurie, Hugh Grant, Christian Bale. He's not Australian, but you have Christian Bale, Russell Crowe. If they can turn their accents on and off, you can do it too. But at the same time, when you have an accent, you add something, a little more depth to the character. It isn't just copy paste. Here's a person.
Yes,
It has more to the character, and a lot of people are like,
exactly.
"No, I agree."
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. That's the thing is that when people go for auditions, usually they have a pretty good idea what the character's about. Sometimes you'll get your sides, and you won't get always a very deep background on the character you're playing. But if you've got some accents in your back pocket that you can just pull out, that you've worked on ahead of time and practiced it hard and long to get that accent down so that it sounds convincing, then that is going to only benefit you as long as you've got it down properly. And that's where a dialect coach comes in. When you go to a dialect coach to help you improve on those. And you mentioned some great names there, and Hugh Laurie is one of them. I wish I'd worked with someone like Hugh. But the thing is, with Hugh Laurie, he became so internationally famous fairly late on in his career. And that's because he heard about the part as Dr. House when he was actually on a vacation, or no, he was shooting a film down in somewhere in the south of Africa, somewhere. I can't remember which country it was. It might have been Botswana. I don't know. But he was shooting down there on location, and he heard about the part of House it was available. So he thought, oh, I can do that. My American accent's pretty solid. He had that in his back pocket. He could pull out, and he actually did the interview in the toilet. Sorry, you guys say the restroom, right? In Britain, we call it the toilet. Here in Canada, they call it the washroom. He actually did it. He did the audition for that part. He did the self-tape in the washroom of the hotel where he was staying, because it was the only place that was quiet enough that he could do his lines there. So he sent this in to the director, and the director, an American guy, had never heard of Hugh Laurie. I mean, obviously now is a household name, but he'd never heard of him. And he's like, oh, who's that? This guy's really good. Like, this American actor, he is the kind of American actor we need for this part. Not knowing that the guy's not American at all. Like, the guy's, as British as probably even more so than I am, because when he talks, his accent it's very English when he talks normally, whereas mine is, because I've lived in Canada so long now, it's become a little bit Canadianized, you might hear. But so the thing is, it's like, he can do that accent to the point where it's convincing enough. And it's very funny because, I grew up as a kid, watching Hugh Laurie on television in comedy shows. He was in Blackadder. I don't know if anybody's not heard of Blackadder. You need to check it out. It's amazing British comedy. He's been in several episodes of that. He had his own show along with Stephen Fry, in a bit of Fry and Laurie. So I grew up with him being this funny guy, like kind of a comedian almost, in sketch shows. And then when I see him, I saw him in House. I'm like, what is Hugh doing? And then, of course, the funniest bit was when people that had seen the show and then saw him in an interview, and they're like, what is this guy doing? Why is he talking in a limey accent? Of course, for me, that was funny because I know he's British. So yeah, that's the thing. And it's so incredibly important to be able to have an accent you can fall back on and rely on and bring out, because like you said, it's an asset. And I know so many people that have booked gigs because, they went there, and during the audition, they didn't know they were gonna, the casting director was like, okay, yeah, that's great. All right, so we'll be in touch. And then they've gone, oh, hang on a minute. Can I do this in the Jamaican accent? And another guy was like, oh, okay, I know this is not the accent you're after. I know you're asking for a Mexican accent, but really, you want a cholo, you want something from this particular country. Like, this was a Hispanic guy, is a guy from Central America. And they're like, yeah, that's what we want. So because those guys had that with them and it's authentic enough, they could book that gig. They booked those shows. So yeah, anyway.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever worked with any A-list celebrities?
Well, if I have, I don't kiss and tell. You've heard of an NDA, right? Non-disclosure agreement.
Well, how about this? You won't mention names, but how about what movies are in?
Yeah, it's, you see, a lot of my clients, they're not just screen actors. They're not, I mean, all actors they're all pros, right? All actors, they've put so much in to their work, and they're constantly training. They're constantly improving themselves. And that's why they come to me, because they know they can rely on me, and because they want to improve. They want to polish what they already have. So, for me, they're all celebrities. But yeah, I'm not going to name drop anything.
All right, what about this? Let's do like categories. Have you ever helped and teach anyone who did Marvel and DC?
No.
What about anime?
Well, the thing is, I haven't gone through everybody's IMDb list, so I can't truly honestly say, oh yeah, nobody I've worked with has done anime, right?
Yeah.
Because it might be that they have. So I don't know.
Yeah. But the next question I want to ask you is, what attracted you to begin your career as a coach?
Okay, well, that's a great question. It's like I said earlier, I've had several careers that haven't just kind of like cleanly started and stopped. So I mean, my first life was as a graphic designer. So I was a graphic designer working at the BBC in London. And during the time that I was there, that's how I got into doing voice work. And because I'd end up in an editing booth with an editor who's working on a piece that I've done a graphic for. And they're like, oh man, I need an accent from Belfast. I'm like, yeah, I could do that. Right. So it's like, okay, yeah, go ahead. And so I was like, okay, give me the script. I go through it and I'll be like, so I talked to Jerry Adams, and he said, this is back in the day when you couldn't even show Jerry Adams' face back at those days in the 90s. And so they're like, oh, yeah, you're pretty good. So that's how the whole voice thing started off for me. And so and it's like, okay, yeah, I'm pretty good. I can do this. And when I eventually emigrated here to Canada, I'd been in lots of plays. I'd done a lot of stage stuff myself, a lot of acting, mostly in an amateur, in an amateur format, right? And so it's something that I would do now and then when I felt like, okay, I'm going to audition for a part. I'm going to do this and take it up. So when I came to Canada, I kept doing that. But I found myself getting a part in a play here in Toronto when I first moved out here. The play was written by an English playwright and set in a particular part of England. I was the only English person in that cast. And so it was really strange to hear like all the other actors, they're all Canadian. And I said to the director, look, this is set in Whitby, which is a town in a particular part of England with a particular accent. And you can't do anything about it. You can't like set it in an imaginary place because it name checks that city. Everybody knows where it is, right? So I said, look, I can help you out here. I'll coach all of the other actors in a Yorkshire accent. And that's what I did. So that's kind of how like I started off with the dialect coaching. It was like, okay, I think I can do this. So I kind of like, I was out of my comfort zone, but by golly, I'm glad I did, because that's how the whole thing started off. And, we were able to put something on stage where, ironically, the only English guy had just a regular kind of RP Southern accent, and all the actors sounded like they were from Yorkshire. So, and I still have friends from that play way back then, that it's like, all right, can you help me out with, topping up my Yorkshire accent? So yeah, that's kind of the story of how I got started.
Absolutely. Now, this one, a lot of people think I should just have a little more, not bells and whistles, but we go a little more in depth. So if everything, well, let me rephrase that. It's a lot of things people are like, oh, I expect you to meet X this episode. I expect you to do this. So that's what I do. I made a list of 40 questions.
Wow,
Eventually,
40.
Eventually, I would have to do all of them over, because most
We're
of
going to be here all night.
well, I tell you, most of them are really good and most of them really suck. So the one I want to ask you is, what has been your greatest achievements as being a acting coach?
Well, first of all, what I should say is that I'm not actually an acting coach per se. I am a dialect coach. What I do, I mean, of course, I build upon my experience of being an actor myself, but I'm not an acting coach. What I do is I will employ acting coaches sometimes to work alongside me. And I would say that my greatest achievement to date, I'm sure it won't be my greatest achievement much longer, but the one to date is having designed, created, and implemented a program for actors to learn how to learn accents on their own. And so what I did was I set this up, I designed it, and I approached an acting coach that I know, that I've actually been to, and has coached me alongside other actors. And I asked her, would you be interested in being a part of this? Because I love the way you work. I love how you're getting these emotions, how you're improving these actors in their craft. I love how you're doing it, and I'd love to work with you. And here's my idea. So that's what we did. We set that up, and it's running right now, and it's going fantastically, better than I could even imagine. So that's what I feel is my greatest achievement, personally.
No, absolutely. No, no, actually, for people out there, what's the difference between being a voiceover coach and what you do?
Okay, so the difference between a voiceover coach, or voice coach, and a dialect coach is that, I mean, first of all, they do overlap, right? Because, I mean, first of all, it's a case of defining the difference between voice and speech. So first of all, voice, of course, is the ability to make the sound that uses your vocal cords and all of the other apparatus between your your vocal cords and where it comes out, the mouth and the nose. So that is voice, which of course a voice coach can also help people with, their singing, their pitch, their range, and all of those things too. Whereas with a dialect coach, it does overlap some of those, because you will be working to some degree in terms of pitch and so on when you're working on a voice with somebody. But it extends further than that. As a dialect coach, it extends into the realm of the kinds of sounds that different accents will have, because then it goes into, the difference between an accent and a dialect as well. So basically what you're doing as a dialect coach is you are giving an actor the tools to be able to create a character that is from a particular place and time, because almost everyone has a voice, right? Most people can speak, and we all have accents. That's another thing. There's a lot of people that have this idea that, oh, well, I don't have an accent, everybody else does, which is absolutely scientifically untrue. That's every single person who speaks a language has an accent, and they speak in an accent. So the next part of that is that it's about pinpointing. It's about working with that person to get them to use the muscles that move their tongue and that regulate their pitch and their voice and everything else and their breathing and so on, in order to make them sound like this character who is not them and is not from the same place and sometimes not the same time period as they are. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, absolutely. Now, let me ask you the last two questions, then we can talk off the air. For people who want to follow in your footsteps, how have you ever coached anyone or worked with anyone who has learning disabilities? And for people with disabilities who want to follow in your footsteps, how would they go about it?
Oh, okay. So that's two questions. So the first one is, have I ever worked with somebody who has disabilities, like learning disabilities? Yes, I have. I have worked with somebody who has different abilities, and have told me upfront about that, because usually if a client approaches me and says, okay, can I work with you? And basically, this is what I love about being somebody who runs their own business, is that you get to choose who you work with, right? So they've come to me, and usually they'll tell me upfront exactly, they'll detail what it is. I mean, I don't ask them. I know, having been an employer in the past, that you don't ask someone, oh, do you have any disabilities? Are there any problems that, like, basically, of course, in the form that they would fill out, I put in there, is there anything that would help me in coaching you? Is there anything I should know that would help me? And usually they'll, be upfront about it and tell me as specifically as they want to what their challenges are. And so that's to answer the first question. And let's see. The other question was, how would someone follow in your footsteps? Now, that's an interesting one. Anybody who says, Mark, how could I follow in your footsteps? I would say, no, don't follow in my footsteps. No, it's like, you see, if you were to ask me, like, oh, how would I become a dialect coach? Or, how would I become a teacher of English as a second language? I can answer those. But I would say not to follow in my footsteps, because, like, my journey, I mean, everybody's journey is different, but I never worked out really what it was that I was good at or what I really wanted to do. I never worked it out for years and years and years. And throughout those years, doing other things that I kind of felt like, oh, I'm kind of quite good at this, but never really truly worked it out until, quite late in my careers, what it was that really made my heart beat. So my real answer to this would be, if you know what it is that you want to do, you're really lucky. You're very lucky to know, because most people don't know what it is they're good at, what they really want to do. But when you find it out, then, that's when you approach someone and say, okay, how did you get there? And everyone's got a different story, because how I got to where I am is very different to most people, because most people don't arrive at being a dialect coach from, being a teacher of English. I mean, a lot of them were actors formerly as well, but there are so many different paths in order to get to the same place, right? So that, I don't know, sounds a bit like a guru answer, but that's the best way I could answer that. So yeah, don't follow in someone's footsteps. Make your own path to get to where you have to be. That's
absolutely. Now I do have to do something. We got movers over, so I have to wrap it up. But I do want to talk to you off the air. But wrapping up our interview segment, it was a real honor and privilege having you as a guest, and I'm looking forward to part 2. And until we meet again, catch you later.